Welcome back, everybody. Skelly and Dan, done with the 400 IM, and we are in the warm down pool. So, welcome back, my partner in crime.
How are you? You hanging in there with the move and everything, the new job?
Good Lord. Yeah, my real job keeps getting in the way of my side hustle here with the podcast, but I'm excited. We're starting off well. I'm happy with the progress we're already making on the recruiting front. I really like the team so far. I've gotten a good feel for them with our individual meetings. So, yeah, now they have finals I think starting next week. Yep. And then they've got graduation after that, and we've got the summer to start planning. So, the fun begins there.
Nothing but progress, right? Nothing but progress.
Absolutely.
One
Well,
foot in front of the other.
good grief. I'm gonna trip and fall. I'm a swimmer. We trip over our own shadows. That's just kinda how we roll. So,
It's true.
well, it's another week. It's another podcast. It's been a couple weeks since we've been able to get together, you and I, with our respective schedules. But this week, the big thing we wanted to talk about was recruiting at the college level and how much chaos there is right now. The transfer portal has had a huge impact on all of NCAA athletics, and swimming is no stranger, as we've seen some pretty big names go into the portal as of late. The latest one that just jumped today, the breaststroker from University of Florida, runner up in the 100, Anita Botazo. I apologize if I butcher her name, but she is
Close
now
enough.
in the portal after 2 years at the University of Florida. But she's hardly the only big name that has jumped in the transfer portal. Athletes, the breaststroker from Michigan going to Texas. We've talked about a few others in the past on this, the people who declared. So I thought it was really important, as I am going through the recruiting process right now, going after the 27s, trying to close out my 26, and looking ahead to the class of 27. I thought, with all that has changed, and you had a front row ticket to it a year ago while you were at Penn State, of just the craziness that was recruiting, I thought it was important that we have a little bit of a conversation of where we are and where it looks like it's going, because the NCAA is playing around with eligibility. That's a whole other show. We'll deal with that one down the line. But
It's
yeah,
sure are. Yeah, it never ends, right? And at the end of the pod or towards the end of the pod, we'll talk a little bit about in my background. I had the unique one of the many hats that I've worn over the years at three universities. I was a member of the club coaching staff as the head coach of the club team, and then assisted with the college team. So I was on both sides of the phone call, helping kids out and trying to get kids to come to the respective schools. I'm wearing my Carolina blue tonight, and that was always interesting. So we're gonna try and give some helpful hints and tips for rising kids about going on trips and talking to coaches and all that stuff. So hopefully we can help you out a little bit and make it not feel so overwhelming and awkward.
yeah. And for me, I mean, I've recruited to three different levels: NCAA D1. Now I'm doing D3. I swam Division two, so I'm familiar with that. But even still, with my background and how long it's been since I was at D1, we couldn't text athletes when I was last at a Division 1 school. And then they changed it my last year at the University of Nevada. We were allowed to text them if they had already signed their national letter of intent, and now it's a free for all. So I think the biggest place we need to really start is the transfer portal. That is the biggest fundamental change in college athletics. We hear about it all the time, specifically the bigger sports, football, basketball. Those are the ones that we are constantly hearing about when it comes to the portal. But swimming is no stranger to that. For the first time in my career, I have access to it. While at an NAIA school, I didn't have access to it. And now I do. So the portal in and of itself is a unique creature. Athletes can enter it without even telling their coaches. They can just go to the compliance officers and say, I want to be in the portal. But as a result of that, athletes, in many cases, the moment they do it, they are done. That aid is cut off. Coaches do not allow that door to swing both directions. Some schools do. It should also be noted that Division 1 and Division 2 are the only ones that are required to go into the portal. Division 3 is not. They have been.
They still have blind transfers.
Yep, they still have blind transfers. And with that, I mean, a lot of them are going into the portal because it opens up their accessibility for Division 2 and potentially Division 1 programs. And you can see whether or not people have done multiple transfers. You can't find out we can go on a search for what other institutions they were at, but they're labeled grad transfers, they're labeled multiple transfers. You can also label yourself as I want no contact, which
Yeah,
means
the
you
no
know
contact
exact
list.
yeah, I know exactly where I'm going. I'm just here for the I'm just here for the popcorn.
Formality of it all. Yeah.
Yep. I think one of the ones that's in the women's portal right now, Tegan Odell with the formerly of the Cal Bears. We had just got done singing the freshman praise at Cal, and then one of them jumps in the portal. So, or Dave, uh, he's got to be a little stressed out there with that.
It's funny how the portal has evolved as well. I remember the very first year of it, I had a girl who I had coached who had gone on to be a freshman in college. She had 5 Olympic trial cuts, was a big time player at junior nationals and senior nationals. I mean, she's a good swimmer. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to me, I had no knowledge of this. I was very big on, hey, once go to school and go be awesome. You did your thing here, and I'll get the next crop going. All of a sudden, my phone starts blowing up with college coaches, some who I know very well, some who I haven't talked to in years, texting me about, hey, want to talk to you about such and such. What kind of kid is, and I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And then I'm like, oh, she's in the portal. So I texted her. I was like, hey, is there something you want to tell me? Give me a little heads
Yeah.
up on here. But she ended up going to school that she seemed to like better, and it worked out for her. It does not always work out for people. The grass is not always greener. That's something to always remember. And sometimes, with a little perspective, you might not. You finally realize, oh, I got a pretty good situation where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's something that is lost on a lot of athletes. And I think part of that is due to the fact that we have so many athletes, they're committing earlier and earlier.
Yes.
We've got most of the Power Four schools have their class of 27 locked up right now. That is bonkers to me.
Yep.
I'm getting started with mine. Again, Division three, different rules. I get it. But the class of 28, the rising sophomores or rising juniors, whatever we're calling them, I don't know what they are anymore. To me, you're a sophomore one day, you're a junior the next. Once the school year flips, they're looking at their 28s. They're starting to line those up. So when they can start calling on July 1, those D1 schools are going to be locking those kids in. I think we're asking these kids who are now younger, they're 16 years old, to make a decision. And I don't know about you, Dan. I was barely mature enough to put on my own underwear, let alone make a college decision at 16.
Yes, I'm a firm believer that it's much too early, to be grandpa, yelling at the clouds here. But uh, when I went through the recruiting process, nobody really talked to you till the spring of your senior year, and then all of a sudden it was kind of like a gauntlet of trips. Everything, barely got phone calls. Everything was done by letter, and they put the hard push on once they saw your times your senior year. So a lot of things have changed. It was striking to me. Again, another unique perspective that I have is not just have I been, mul coach at the Big Ten, ACC, CC, Ivy League, the whole deal, as well as head coach of club team, head coach of a prep school team, where the whole point is to prepare them for college. I've also been the parent of and the step parent of uh, two student athletes who went through the recruiting process. You could have knocked me over with a feather. When it was a couple years ago, I guess 4 years ago now, my son Sam, pretty good swimmer, he started getting recruited by some real good Division I schools. And as I'm talking to the coaches, this and that, I finally started to clue in. Oh yeah, I think I'm supposed to go on the trips with him now. And I even asked the coaches, "Do you want me to come?" And they were like, "Well, for the ones who are rising juniors, etc. Yes, we kind of like it if a parent comes along." I was like, "Okay." Had a coaching staff meeting. I'm like, well, not gonna be here for these practices. I need coverage because I'm gonna go on these trips. So the funny thing is I'd been to all the schools, and I actually visited 2 out of the 3, and so it was a little stroll down memory lane for me. But yeah, that's a real unique situation uh that I had the perspective on. And then with my stepdaughter, it was a situation where she was a good swimmer, but she really wasn't getting much traction, much play. She wasn't getting a lot of calls or anything. And I did a real good job of I tried to stay out of it and let them do their own thing and make their own decisions. I'm here if you know, I could be dad, I could be coach, whichever one you want me to be. And finally I asked her senior year because I was like, "We're getting a little late in the process here. Most of the time, you know, you want me to help you out?" And she was like, "Yes." So I called, made a bunch of different contacts, and the refrain was kind of the same on a lot of levels. We'd love to have her, but we're full
Yep,
for the year. I was like, "Okay, well, something opens up, let us know." So we had to go down to, very late in the process, late spring of her senior year, she finally signed and is in a good spot, and so it's kinda unique, the process that goes on now, and that's why, if you're a parent, I could understand why it's a little intimidating.
for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I moderate one of an admins on a Facebook group for parents to ask questions, and we try to do the best we can. I think what's really impacted me as a coach, somewhat as an outsider on this. Like again, I've had some transfers in my day when I was at my last position. I'm actually talking to two potential that were in the portal tomorrow. I've got an opportunity to hopefully bring them on board. I'd love that because I think they can help our program. But we're also at a point where we're forcing these kids to make decisions early in their academic careers. Again, can't sign anything until your senior year. And I don't even know if they have a national letter of intent anymore because there was all that argument about whether that was going to stay. But then you're turn around, your kid gets into the portal, you're giving them 10 days to make a decision or less. I heard a story from one of my former swimmers. One of her friends visited I guess it's Big 12 school. It might not have been Big 12 at the time, but they have since joined and went down there for an overnight visit, had a great time. They were from Indiana, drove through about 7, 8 hour drive. And the coach, before they left, said, "Hey, had a great visit. Team loves you. We're going to be in touch." Okay, great. Awesome. She still had two more visits. Okay, that's fair. On the drive home, not even halfway, gets a call from the assistant coach. "Hey, we're offering you a scholarship. Here's the dollar amount. We need a decision in the next 48 hours." Are you kidding me? But that's not uncommon. And I talked to a
That's not
basketball coach.
sadly, it's not uncommon at all.
No, I talked to a basketball coach one time and he did a home visit. And I said, "How long after you do a home visit or anything do you make an offer? And how long do they usually have?" He goes, "They get the offer when I sit down. They have until I walk out of the room to make that decision." And I was like, "Well, I'm glad that's not my sport." Turns out it was my sport. And is that crazy? Because these athletes are forced into a decision, and I think that's why we're starting to see more and more swimmers and other sports as well enter the portal because let's be real, we both have been on the other side of that recruiting call as a coach. "Hey, this is Eric Skelly, head coach at Lake Forest College. Let me tell you all about my institution." And we're used car salesmen. We are. And we don't want them to sometimes we don't want them to look under the hood.
You gotta
And
sell it.
you gotta sell it. But one of the things I've always prided myself on is that I've always tried to be genuine. That the person that you're seeing and you're hearing is genuinely the same person that's on the deck. That's not always the case. We both know that. I've worked for coaches like that. I'm sure you have as well. That
Yeah,
who they are on the phone versus who they are when they get them on campus, different animal. It's the same thing in all sports. I think it's very I think it's disingenuous if you're not authentic to the people. I mean, I flat out told my swimmers, like, "Look, they're going to ask you if I'm an asshole. You can tell them yes. I will have already disclosed that information. I can be a jerk. We all know that. Coaches can be. That's who we are. I steal my athletes' thunder. God, they hate it. Oh, they hate it. I love it though. But I think especially now with technology, getting kids on the phone a lot harder to do because it's not what they want to do. They'll text you, they'll DM you left and right. Even texting can be a problem. But the biggest problem that I have seen, and it goes both directions. And college coaches, if you're listening, if you've done this, man, just be ashamed. Ghosting. Like we know texting an athlete, we're having a great conversation. We're connecting over a couple weeks. "Hey, how was this meet? How'd you do this weekend? Told me about this test you had. How'd that go?" Nothing. And then nothing. And then the follow up and nothing. And then that follow up and nothing. But I hear horror stories on the other side, and I see it on social
yes.
media that kids are like, they're texting coaches. I just saw it on a Facebook group that I'm in. It's another a parent resource one. It's run by one of the recruiting agencies that's out there. And I saw a post on it that like God, what they were talking about, like they have one email that goes to all four coaches. and they were getting no responses back. And that's just that should never be a thing at all. Like that's a if you're a coach and you've got one email going to four coaches and none of you can respond, forget it. And it ghosting is just it's a problem. And I have appreciated my assistant coach Zoe and I, we probably have sent out, geez, probably close to 500 text messages to potential recruits that could help our program because we're casting a wide net. That's just how we are. And being where we are in D3, we can do that.
Yeah.
500 are out. I think we've heard back positively from about 15 of them. We've heard back no thank you from about 25 to 30. The rest of them crickets. And I don't have a problem. You say you're not interested in my school. We don't have your major. You want to stay on the West Coast. You'd rather be in the South. You want a bigger school. Awesome. All you have to do is tell me and I'll take you out of my emails, my text, everything. But coaches, on the flip side of that, if this kid doesn't meet your standards, if you don't have a roster space for him, if you
Tell them.
tell him,
Tell
good
them.
Lord, be the adult in the room.
Yes.
Don't spring them along. And heck, there's been a few times I've even recommended kids like, look, I don't have anything, but I know this program does have aid available. They have spots available. They can put you on their roster and they're going to have the same major. Generally, it's a team I don't compete against. I'm not going to give somebody to my enemy. That's for sure. But again, it's about making sure that that conversation is had and it's just as quick as a text message. We all know, here's the thing, we know those kids are on their phones. We know they see it. We know they can respond. The number of times I've been left on red is amazing. But on the flip side of that, coaches, you're on your phones almost as much as they are. Sometimes if not more. It's driving me nuts on that. I mean, we talk about earlier commitment. This class of 27 is locked for the Power Fours. There's roster cap situations, and you know the transfer portal is opening up. I've seen it too many times. I think you were talking with a friend of yours that because I mentioned I saw a lot from one particular school in the portal,
Yes.
and I'm not naming names. That I said, hey, you know the coach there? What's going on? And they're like roster cuts. Had to cut them down. And I went, poor kids, because you
Yes.
go to school with the expectation that that's your 4 years, that's your home, and then for whatever reason you're cut. And it used to happen to walk-ons all the time. I mean, especially the Division I schools that had because of Title IX, they had to. I'll give an example. There's a Big Ten school women's only program had to carry 38 women every year to help offset for football.
Correct.
Okay, of those 38, probably 16 of them they were casualties every year. But you kind of expected that with the walk-ons. Now these are scholarship kids that are getting cut because
Right.
you gotta recruit the portal just as heavy as you recruit those high school kids. And it's worse in football, it's worse in basketball, but we're trending that direction. I don't like it, Dan. I don't like it at all.
I know some coaches now that, there's many of them. They have so many spots for recruited high school kids or international kids, new students, and then they saved some portal spots open because that's a whole 'nother area where if they don't recruit it there, they could really miss out on something very well. So yes, it's lot it is funny, that guy's a good friend of mine who the situation beforehand where a bunch of his girls, were in the portal because he had to make roster cuts, and he was one of those schools that, before he had to have a ton of girls on the team for Title IX and for football to help them out university-wise. That was his mandate. And then all of a sudden the rules change, and it stinks for the kids, you know? I sent him many a text that week when he was having to have those hard conversations. It's like, "Hey, you hanging in? You alright?" He's like, I'll be okay, but this is rough." I'm like, "Oh, I could only imagine." No fun for either party.
And you and I talked. I was at an NAIA school, which typically those schools carry huge rosters, and even for a while I did. I was closing in on 70 at one point, but because of changes in policy and how we operated as an institution, I actually had a roster maximum, and I had to make those cuts. That was physically the most painful day of my coaching career. To tell kids that I had invited to be a part of our family. And I've talked to multiple
Yeah,
Power
well,
Four Four schools, most of them in the SEC. One coach told me flat out, he goes, after I got done with all my meetings, I turned off my phone and I didn't go into the office for 2 days. I physically was ill afterwards. And we've heard horror stories about that. We've heard kids just getting I'm really sorry. We're going to do everything in our power to find a new home for you. I talked with a Big Ten coach that told me the exact same thing. Like he had to cut down to 30 and 30, and he had to make those hard decisions. Those kids still practiced with the team. They still practiced. They still represented the institution till the day they found a new home. But I also heard on the other side a coach in a Power Four conference who had to cut down, and he was like, clean out your locker room. I'm done with you. Goodbye. I don't want to see you anymore. You're taking up my time.
Yeah,
And
there is that
thankfully,
side of it too.
my God, cold-blooded, and I was like, I don't know how you can be that way. Now, like I said, I can be a jerk. I can. I have my moments, but and not in that case, man. Those kids, they came there, they wanted to be a part of something special. You invited them in their house. And here's the one I'm hearing, and this is one that's even nuttier to me. You're hearing about Power Four coaches. They're looking around at the mid-majors and going, okay, how do I get a little birdie in their ear to get in the portal?
Yeah,
And we've seen our fair share of these kids who may have been automatic qualifiers. They're going after that NIL. They're going after that bag. They're trying to get that money. And there may not be a lot of it out there in swimming, but some schools definitely are set up for it. And with the rising cost of schools and the cost of education, and I'm seeing it firsthand here at a Division III school. D3 is notorious for their cost. Now, tip that I tell everybody, don't look at the price tag, look at what it's going to cost you, because at
yes.
the end of the day, financial aid departments can work miracles. Sometimes I wish they didn't. I wish they could put their best deal right on the table up front. But then there's other days where I'm like, okay, I get it. It's a little bit of a negotiation sometimes. They're a lot smarter about this stuff than I'll ever be. So we'll let them do their jobs, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah, and that's why communication, like so many other things in life, is so critical, on both ends, on the student athlete's end and the coach's end, to let people know, exactly what's going on. We got again, I have 2 kids who are in this NCAA swimming thing, either was in or currently are. And this past weekend, we got hit with a little bit of a raise-a-roo on the old tuition from the school, and had to, work closely with the coach to really figure out exactly what was going on and exactly what we were going to have to commit to financially, or were we going to have to pivot and find a new place. Nothing against it, just couldn't afford it anymore. So there's and through good communication, etc., we got to a point where everybody was pretty happy. But communication is so critical, and the thing that college coaches need to be careful of is if you're not going to be open and honest with people. People talk, and they spread the word about how people were treated, etc. For better or for
mhm.
worse. Well, if you were really great with somebody, you also get that too. But people talk. It's a big swimming world, but it's also a very small community. It's got that small community to it as well. The communication part is so critical, because you're exactly right. When the kids, I had to start so when the kids started going as juniors, I had to start telling the kids, because I saw it firsthand. That means they're visiting as, like, they're young. I mean, they are young. When they're on their visit, the coach is like, "Hey, so what do you think about majoring in, etc." And sometimes they didn't quite know yet what they were majoring, and I had to let them know that, hey, that's perfectly acceptable. You're 16 years old. You don't know, and you may know right now, but when you're 19, 20, you could have completely different views on things. You probably will, more often than not. So it's a little bit far-fetched to think that you've got it all figured out. If you do, more power to you. But I had to make it clear to kids, it's perfectly acceptable to say, well, I'm thinking about some things that might interest me, but I'm not quite at a firm place yet.
And I think you talked about it right there. Majors. I had two sons that went off to college. Neither one of them were athletes. My oldest son, he was going journalism from the time he was a freshman in high school. He graduated with a degree in journalism, and he's working as a morning news producer. Shout out WSAW in Wausau, Wisconsin. Got a little cheap pop there from my son. But my younger son didn't know what he wanted to do when he went to college. Didn't even know if he really wanted to go to college. That was another one. And he was coming out of the pandemic, so he was He was done with online education. He was done with virtual stuff. And so he didn't know what he wanted to do. Goes to school, starts off as a business major with an accounting minor. Realized real quick he wanted no part of accounting, and then took, I think it was macroeconomics, and realized real quick he wanted nothing to do with business. But he found his home later in communications and media, doing phenomenal. I tell every kid that I've ever known, and I actually, the other night, I happened to talk with a club team in Illinois, know the head coach really, really well, known him for 30 years. He invited me down to talk to his kids, not just as a representative of Lake Forest College, but also to talk about college recruiting. So I gave him a little 20-minute speech, and I'm going back to talk to parents later. I told every kid there, go in undecided. Do not go in there and declare a major. And I said, you're going to be happier. You're going to get your gen ed classes out of the way. You're going to have flexibility in your schedule. Your coaches are going to love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And then who knows, you might have wanted to major in biology, and then you take a psychology class and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I really like psych more than I like population bio. Okay, let's go make a run at that. So when looking at it from a recruiting standpoint as an athlete, I tell every single one of them, yes, you may know in your heart you want to be an engineer. You may know deep in your heart you want to be a nursing major or a pharmacy major. And there's some of them you have to disclose. Like if you're a nursing major, your college coach needs to know that up front because, man, you're going to play games trying to get your clinicals done and everything. I think nursing and pharmacy are absolutely the two hardest to be a college athlete because pharmacy is a 6-year degree anyway, and nursing with all their clinicals not far behind. You've got to disclose those. You better have a passion for it because if you don't, and after year two, man, you've got a lot of classes that you've already burned that are going to get taken out as electives. But otherwise, go in undecided. It doesn't hurt anything. And you have, believe at the Division I level, you have up until your end of your sophomore year to declare your major. Wait that long. I've had kids do that.
Yeah, when I was at Penn State, they had so many majors there, I never even heard of some of some of the majors. I was like, "Really? You can major in that?" And there's some of their schedules were just wacky. There's one kid on the team who basically didn't have school except for Wednesday and Thursday. Then from, like, 8 in the morning till 10 at night was all school, but the rest of the time she was completely off. Very, very interesting setup. So, uh
And with the cost of higher education, and we're not just talking small liberal arts colleges right now. We're not
anyway,
talking about Ivy Leagues or NESCAC, which is or UAA schools. We're talking about state schools
yes.
because here's the kicker: you could go to a small private institution and get 60% merit aid or whatever covered, and your out of pocket is X. Okay. You could go to your own state school. Okay. I'm still in Kentucky right now. All right. Go to the University of Kentucky. You're a swimmer there. Okay. Maybe you get a little bit of scholarship. You get like a couple grand. The merit aid is minimal because UK is going to get their numbers. They're going to put their heads in beds. They don't need athletics to drive enrollment like a lot of small NAIA D3 and D2 schools do. So your X at Kentucky might be more than you paid for your X at Lake Forest College, let's say. I don't know. Pre-reads are critical for parents. I cannot stress that enough. And I think we're going to do another show altogether talking about parents' roles in recruiting. I really want to talk about that because there are moms and dads that get blindsided with things, and there are moms and dads that are way too involved in it. But it's really
That is a
important.
whole different that is a whole 'nother show.
Whew, that could be a two-parter. Who knows? But with rising costs and shrinking aid, because schools are trying to maximize their dollar, and we have seen a decline in birth rate over the last 20 years here in the United States, and it's really starting to come to the forefront because boomers the baby boomers gave birth to Gen X and millennials. Gen X is one of the smallest generations in history. Millennials is larger. There's more of them. Gen Z is another small generation because who are their parents? Their parents are Gen X. So small leads to small. Gen Alpha, which is the latest one, they're going to be the next ones coming up. They're the children of millennials, but they're not going to eclipse that in terms of birth rate because people just can't afford to have kids. We're seeing institutions start to close. The worst one that I see, and it's not a shot against the sport, if you see a small college that's never had football before and they're adding football, good luck. That school's on its last legs. That's a Hail Mary in so many different ways because they're trying to add 100+ heads and beds. If I can't remember what school it was. They added football and 3 women's sports all at the same time. I did the math. That's going to put in an estimated 250 heads and beds. That's scary for schools. And with swimming, we don't know where we're gonna be at here in the next 5 years. Obviously, I don't know if you saw the article today, the CSCA is recommending some changes, bringing back the B finals. They're talking about.
I did see that. All of them
Yep,
seem to make sense.
yep, and I like the proposals. I think the whatever the
Relays all together, all that, you know,
well, not all, not quite. The 2 fastest heat is what I think they're
too fast.
proposing,
Yeah.
which I'm good with that. I'm good with that. That's gonna put, again, what we talked about in the one show, that puts more people on the pool deck, that makes the event a little more exciting. I think they're looking to increase the cap so that the automatic qualifiers aren't taking away kids that would have made the line. Okay. I like the direction we're going. But as a result of a lot of this, we're also hearing that at some point, the Big Ten and the SEC, they want to play by their own rules for football. They're going to take their ball and literally go home. And if they break away completely, and I talked with a person who's at USA Swimming, he's the liaison with USA Swimming through the NCAA office, spoke with him about a year ago at convention. And he mentioned, he goes, the year we really have to keep an eye on is 2032, because that's when basketball contracts start coming up. And if the Power Four schools can figure out a way, and I'm sorry, I think it's only going to be the Power Two, and whoever they want to take along for the ride, Clemson, Florida State, the UNC, Kansas, a few of the Big 12 schools, the SEC and the Big 10 are going to break, and they're going to take their friends and family with them. Okay, there's a minimum number of sports that have to be held to hold D1 status at the Division One level. Do you think that new organization is going to have that same standard?
Not quite. No.
And Olympic sports are going to be on the chopping block, and that could give rise to the mid majors. It really could, because we're already starting to see a small upswing where kids can see, and we talked about on the show, that they have an opportunity to get an AQ and maybe parlay that into a Power Four from there. But it comes with pitfalls, because these programs are going to be just like the regular Power Four or mid majors in other sports, where they're just going to be kind of a holding ground. It's very similar to what the NJCAA was for a very long time for swimming. There were a lot more JUCO programs in the United States that were holding patterns for kids to go to D1. And I think what you're also going to see, and it's already happening, the rise of college club swimming.
I was just gonna say that. Yes. Yes.
I've had 3 kids tell me, 2 27s and 1 26, tell me they're going to stay and go to a big state school and join the club team.
I had a guy who I used to coach, went to a big time school, very, very, very good school. He's a really good swimmer, really good, very good, high school level swimmer coming out, was just on that edge of being in such a good school, whether he wasn't, sometimes he was on the traveling team, sometimes not, just missed the conference team. He went and did club swimming this year and won a couple events and had an absolute blast and really loved it. Not that he was, well, he was a little disgruntled with the sport, because it's hard when you never know if you're actually going to a meet or not. That's a tough place to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it reinvigorated his love for the sport, which is fun to see. I think one of my big messages that I hammer to people is, hey, if you want to keep on swimming in college, there's places for you.
Yes.
There are places for you. Just cause you're not going to the Power Four, there's plenty of other options. And, Division II, Division III, look at their nationals. They're fast. NAIA, they're fast. There's plenty of opportunities. And the club swimming is only going to get bigger and catch on more. And I think there's some real support out there for it, because, and it's the whole trickle down thing. I've talked to a lot of clubs in my consulting that I do now. And one of the things that I've been harping on with them is, hey, you better start planning now, because this is going to trickle down to your business. Who's kidding who? A reason why, yes, swimming is a safe sport. It's a great lifetime skill. It's not football. You're not going to get a concussion out of it, but there is that belief that, hey, maybe a swimming scholarship, etc. Well, if those opportunities start to shrink, or people aren't aware of those opportunities, it's also a sport. When you're a parent of kids, it's not cheap. Lots of travel, all that stuff, dues, equipment, all that. If you've got multiple children, it's not a cheap endeavor. So I've talked to the clubs about, hey, this is going to trickle down and affect you all when They was like, we'll just play, rec soccer instead, or something else, or just swim high school." And I'm a big proponent of high school swimming. I love high school
Yep.
swimming. So it all has its trickle down,
Yep.
and it will affect the clubs. And I've been like, you better start coming up with your think tank and your plan on this now, because that's the way the wind's blowing.
Agreed. And if you look at the top five for the women, top five for men at the college club championships, I've got the results up here. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, top men's, top women's team. Unfortunately, they just dropped swimming, so they've got a lot of athletes that are still there. Second place on the women's side, Virginia, as if we didn't have that name already out there. Grand Canyon, another great program for Division One, but their club program was third for the women. Georgia Tech, Michigan. And then on the men's side, second place was UNC Liberty, which does not have a men's program. So you're seeing
Right.
a lot of schools that don't have men's teams
Right.
in the NCAA. Their club programs are really good. Georgia and Georgia Tech were right there. And the team that has won the most college club national championships in history, the University of Colorado at Boulder. If I'm not mistaken, I think they've won the most. Hasn't had a men's or a women's
Right.
swim team in my lifetime. So that
Exactly.
I know of. But you look at this and you look at these teams and what the opportunities that are out there. I'm great. To me, this is bittersweet. I think it's awesome that these kids have an opportunity to continue on and swim. It's also pain for me as a college coach, painful. Come swim for me. Come swim for me. And I understand. I do understand it's a business and people make decisions that they feel is best for their long-term future. A great example. I had a good friend of mine, his oldest son swam for a Division III school in Ohio. Daughter swam through high school, wanted no part of college swimming. Wasn't interested at all. Swam because dad was the high school coach. I get it. We've all had those. So she ends up at Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio, good men's and women's varsity programs, NCAA. She's not going to make that roster. She knows that. Joins the club team and is having a blast because it's a little bit more social for him. It's a little more laid back. Go to practice when you want. Very
A
much
little
like,
summer league component to it, you know?
yes,
Uh,
very much so.
yeah,
And I think it has
and
its
there's nothing
place.
wrong with
I think there's definitely room for growth. What I fear is going to happen is that at some point this is going to be what happens to our varsity programs, and we've seen the first shot across the bow in another sport. I don't know if you followed this story. Quinnipiac, which is a school in New York, has won multiple women's rugby national championships. Told the team, we're downgrading you to club. This is a school that has the most famous women's rugby player of all time for the United States, Alana Marr. Shout out to our Olympic bronze medalist there. They produced Olympians, and they're downgrading a varsity sport
it. Read that, yeah.
to club. What happens when a Power Four does that to swimming?
Yes.
That's where I love that there's opportunities. I actually when I met with that club team the other day, a young man asked me, "Hey, does the University of Illinois have a club team? I want to go there for their engineering program because I've gotten a big scholarship from them. Do you know if they have club?" And I said, "I don't, but start one." Every one of those club teams was started by a
Mhm.
student athlete or a student in general, and secure pool time. I know the pool there. It's called Impy. It's their intramural and recreation center. Get pool time. Talk with the people who organize clubs on campus. There might be some funding there for you. You're going to have to do a lot of fundraising. They pay for their travel. They pay for their entries. It's still not cheap, but they still get to wear that logo. Because I watched that meet, man. Those kids were wearing the Ohio State Big O. They were wearing that UNC Tar Heel blue like you've got on. Which, by the way, your son being at NC State, how do you think he's going to like that Tar Heel blue? I'm calling that one out right.
He's cool with it. He grew up a Tar Heel fan, and then, state was
Yep.
great. He loves it there, you know?
Okay.
And now,
I'm just
hey
checking. I'm just
hey,
checking. I
I've
might.
literally gone to the dark side. I have plenty of NC State stuff that I wear proudly now. So,
Yeah, I can tell you this. Any of my either of my children walks in my house with maize and blue on, we got problems. We got problems there. But moving on to it, let's break it down here on the end that for the kids for recruiting, and we're going to, like I said, we're going to do another show down the line to talk about what parents need to ask. But the things for me, I'm just like every coach in America, and I don't care if you're D1, I don't care if you're D3 or NEIA or JUCO. We have a pre-packaged answer for almost all the questions that kids know us. How many yards do you do? What's your training schedule? What's your team culture like? I strongly suggest to these kids, come up with some individual questions for the teams. Be creative. Put me on my edge. I,
That
I had a
yeah,
great question asked of me by a freshman, or sorry, an incoming, she was going to be a senior, but she ended up being a freshman for me. She said, "What is your relationship like with your freshmen?" I'd never really been asked that question before, and I answered it for him. And okay, what is your relationship like with your alumni? Okay, that's a great question. I told him exactly how that one
that's
went.
what you don't hear every day.
Yep, and I another question, and I can't take credit for it. I'm gonna pass it on to Greg Earhart, who is the owner of Swim Cloud, and before that, he was the head coach at Carthage College. He had been at Indiana as well as Arizona State. He was also the executive director of the CSCA. I saw him post this in a group for questions. Who's your top recruit, and why is it me? I was like, man, if a swimmer ever asked me that question, I'm walking him over to financial aid that minute. We're getting him a pre-read. I'm getting him admitted on the spot because that's the kid I want. But
Yeah, that's a funny question. That's a funny
I,
question.
st- I always tell athletes, put coaches on their toes. Because my son, my youngest son said, "I'm going to create a soundboard for you, Dad. All you have to do is press a button, and you've got your prepackaged." Because they knew my recruiting speech almost as good as I did, and if not, probably sometimes better because they hear it more often. But I really believe that you have to be creative in that process when you're asking coaches, because if you're putting a coach in a comfort zone, you're not going to get a feel for him. If you're putting a coach in an awkward situation, man, you get a great read on who he is. And the same holds true for the coaches putting kids on the spot. I make kids ask me questions. I make them because I want them.
The other thing I really hammer on the kids is, especially when they're on their trip, ask the same question to a bunch of different people. If everybody comes gives you pretty much the same answer, guess what? Then that's probably the way things roll around that particular team and institution. If you ask that question to 20 different people and you get 18 different answers, that's in my mind, that's a red flag. That's something to consider. Um, I really think I think both those approaches are what you can't do, especially on a recruiting trip or on a recruiting call, etc., is just be mute. You got to interact, even if it's not. Again, get out of your comfort zone a little if you're the kind of quiet, shy type, and be a little gregarious and don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what you're there for. That's the whole purpose of the interaction. And when you're just starting out in the process, in my mind, there's kind of like 5 questions that you gotta answer in the very beginning of the process, and that's gonna really help you out, what do you wanna study? Granted, well, we just said you don't have to know for sure, but you gotta have some kind of idea, right?
Agreed.
Because I used to joke with kids all the time, like, "Are you going pro in swimming? I don't think so." So there's this thing called the educational component and the degree and on to graduate school, etcetera, all that stuff that really applies. So that's definitely one. Figure out what part of the country do you wanna be in? That makes a big difference. Figure out, do you wanna be the best one on the team? Do you not mind being in the middle? Do you not mind being towards the bottom of the team and having to work your way up? That's another super, super important question. You start to answer those questions, and the nice thing is, well, it starts to whittle down the schools for you, you know? And if you can get them to check all those boxes, uh, you know, do you want to be on a huge team or a huge school, or do you want to be in a smaller, maybe a little more private institution? Do you want to be in a city, or do you not mind being out in the sticks? Yeah, yeah. I had one guy, I love to tell this story. It came down to they'd done their homework and they narrowed their decision down to they were either going to go. Person was either going to go to Georgia Tech or Virginia Tech. And I laughed and I said, well, that's great, and they were gonna go visit the places and make their decision, and I'm like, "Well, that's great. The answer will become very apparent to you, it'll be right there because the only thing those 2 schools have in common is the whole tech, component. You got downtown Atlanta and beautiful, but kinda out there in the country a little bit, Blacksburg. Uh, both have their very much great parts to them, but so go check it out, and the answer will be there right in front of your eyes, pretty much.
Agreed. And I think that for a lot of kids, we talked about it earlier, they're getting pressed into decisions at a younger age. So we need to start educating parents and club coaches earlier. We need to get the club coaches involved in the process. And some of them have been great. A guy that you used to compete against quite a bit, Marshall Goldman, who at TNAC. I credit my pipeline to Knoxville when I was at Cumberland's to Marshall Goldman, because Marshall Goldman used to tell all his. First of all, he made all of his rising seniors write 30 emails to coaches, even if you really weren't interested in school. You had to
Mhm.
write 30. Made them all. I love that. First of all, he also would meet with them and talk to them about the recruiting process. And I believe he said it this way: counting D1, 2, and 3, and NAIA, there are 32 All Americans awarded every single year for the 50 free, the 100 free, all the way through to the 400 IM. I stood there and heard him say it. Does it really matter what division it is listed underneath it? You're still an All American. And one of the best swimmers that I've ever had, and she just went into the Hall of Fame at the University of the Cumberlands this past year. I spoke to her. She wanted to be close to home. She wanted to be the big dog, and she was. There's no question about it. And she wanted to be in a situation where she could get the preparation she needed for graduate school or medical school in her case. And she's now a surgical resident in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So she's in Dan's backyard right now. Again, club coaches, we got to get them on board. And I know after I went to that club the other day, shout out to Core up in the Mount Prospect or Prospect High School, Mount Prospect area of Illinois. Matt Zimmer, one of their coaches. I've known Matt for 30 years. And shout out to Matt for bringing me down and talking with his kids. And I know I'm going to go back up there. And their head coach has said, hey, we're trying to get multiple clubs and parents to meet with you and really hear what you have to say from a recruiting standpoint and to sell your institution. So I think it's important that we start educating parents at a younger age, not a younger, earlier in the process, so that way they are walking into these coaches' offices prepared and ready to have conversations, whether it's text, phone, face to face, and get them prepared as best we can. So that way, when they're making that decision in a year's time, they're not jumping into the transfer portal. Awesome. Well, brother, it has been a good one. We finally got back on the air. Shout out to that. I know it's taken a while with me commuting back and forth to Chicago. I can't wait till I have a permanent quote unquote studio, also known as my man cave. And we're going to keep putting out content. Next week's episode, we'll be recording at some point. We'll put a shout out on all of our social media. You can find us at the Warm Down Pool Podcast on Facebook. We are at the Warm Down Pool on Instagram. I haven't updated Twitter in a while, so I better get on that because I forgot we had a Twitter, but I will definitely link all this in onto those pages. You can find us on Spotify and on YouTube. So for Dan Flack, I'm Eric Skelly. We're out of here. They're kicking us out of the Warm Down Pool.
Have a good one, y'all.